start the recording. So welcome everybody. Happy New Year to you too. I mean, it's not too late to wish that. I hope you had a good time over Christmas winter break. That you are now ready to enter the next half year in which you will basically start writing your thesis. At least you will have the research methods course, and you will also have to deal more intimately with the research proposal. And I thought that is a good point, let's say today, to also speak a little bit about the rationale of the research proposal and how it should look like and why should we engage in it, and so on. Well, before I would like to start, and I hope some of you or you had a chance to look a little bit into this article. I sent it you for this meeting. Before, I would like to ask any questions you may have with regard to thesis writing, and maybe also questions on our last meeting where we looked into, let's say, how to get from a certain problem, from a certain social phenomenon over a problem to an appropriate research question, and where we talked about let's say, your position as a researcher in this whole process of writing academic papers or writing a thesis. And we also made the distinction between an open and a closed research question. So let's first start with a round of, giving maybe a brief, let's say, status of what you think by now about your thesis. What are your feelings with regard to it? Maybe what have you already done, or what you plan to do? Can we make just a short round? If you don't want to speak up, you can also maybe type something in the chat. Otherwise, please feel free just to open your micro and start giving me some spotlight on how you are and what are you doing with regard to your thesis.
I can share. I haven't, I'm still stuck at the topic and finalizing the topic itself. So haven't made much of a progress there. Yeah.
Okay. So, but I mean, did you think a little bit about in what direction it could go?
Yeah, I have a field in mind, but not specific what exactly. Like sustainability is one, and AI is another. But
okay,
exactly what in it, I'm not sure.
Okay, I mean that's also not surprising because I mean you are only at the beginning of the journey. But what is good is, I mean, if you have two of these catchwords already, like AI and sustainability, and maybe a combination thereof, I mean, you exclude a million of other questions. You might be puzzled, so that's fine, because I mean, this is also from where you can start. Yeah. Any other voices?
Yes, I had already selected the topic, and also working, also professor I selected because I'm working on sustainability in shipping and chemical tanker shipping. So it's with my company only. My sustainability manager will be my one mentor, and then I've chosen already professor. She agreed. So, and now I'm already framing the initial structure, and I will like to submit her. I assume I will be finished by next week, so I will submit her. Yeah. So
okay.
That's
so you already work on the research proposal?
Yes. It will be more or less technical and business proposal, how in our company we are doing projecting and sustainability shipping and how much investments we are doing and everything. So it is obviously technical and business also plan what we are doing. So.
Okay, so Sita, that's good that you, I mean, first of all, that you have could motivate your company to also, let's say, sponsor at least with their data some the topic.
Yeah, that's the plan. Yeah, so that's the reason I took my sustainability manager. So he will be my mentor. So
yeah,
so
yeah. Yeah, I mean that there's always, I mean, this is also, I think we discussed last week too, last meeting too. I mean, a kind of a delicate situation in the sense that, I mean, probably maybe he's not your boss, but maybe he's, let's say, a colleague.
No, he's yeah, not a boss, yeah, colleague, but yeah, he's manager, so obviously he's above me, but yeah, but he's not my boss. Yes.
Okay, so and you need then to devote some efforts to also make him aware that this is also like a academic thesis that you
Yes,
make.
yes. So he's quite fresh. He just did his MBA 2 years back.
Okay,
So
he's
he's the best fit, more or less.
That's very good.
So,
Good to hear that.
okay.
I always warn a bit when you have a company manager as your supervisor, whether they are really prepared that maybe the thesis take somewhat a different, or at least part of it take a different direction that might not be directly interested to them, but rather has to cater with the demands of writing an academic thesis. But good, very good that you progressed already. Martin, you also raised your hand.
Yes, hello, Professor. I couldn't assist to last class, so cut me sounds like if I am a little bit not in the correct like my framing the question, but just a quick update regarding my thesis. So I've been thinking of the topic. I would like to research about like what is the effect or how can businesses be affected by this new global order or like what we are seeing in changing to this
you mean the global disorder?
Yeah, that's a very beautiful way to frame it. So it's like to this new multipolar reality. But my biggest challenge so far, it's like how can it be lengthy enough but also be specific, because the topic that I am like thinking, of course, in as a draft, it's very broad, very ambitious. But we are in a thesis, in a master, so that's what like that's where I'm like doubting right now, because I am not quite sure how big or how small should the thesis be. And you mentioned in your short intro that questions or the research questions can be open-ended questions or not open-ended questions. This gives me a little bit of sense of like my doubt, but really.
Yeah, I mean the story. Yeah, let me start with the question of open and closed research question. I mean, an open research question is a question that is where you do not find much academic literature on a particular subject. And I would say the impact on geopolitics, or let's say the new world order, or no matter how we frame it, on business conduct. I mean, this is a relatively recent topic where maybe one can make some observations from Corona pandemic, where the world was in disorder too, but or the global financial crisis. But still, I mean, it's a relatively new topic, so that this typically is an open research topic, and an open research question compared to a closed research question where you have academic literature from which you can develop hypotheses, and then you can test these hypotheses. I would say in your case, this is more like an open research question. And
yeah.
I mean,
no, I agree. Sorry.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that I mean that you have just mentioned. I mean, there is some people are beginning to think about, let's say, how business conduct can, let's say, be under these new, let's say, much more volatile business world. There is a concept that's called the VUCA world. Maybe you have heard about this one, where you have at least some academic work on the field. And there are also some more, I mean, my major is international business. And so here in my discipline, I mean, people are currently thinking about frameworks. How should, let's say, the international configuration of a multinational corporation be in order to be, let's say, equipped to deal with these new situations, enhance flexibility. So people are talking like, I mean, there are certain reactions that you maybe change the business locations. Like, for instance, Apple is not so much doing a production, is not exclusively in China again, with this mounting conflicts between China and the US. So there are several ways. And what you could do is, I mean, simply take a certain industry and maybe take a look at what can you actually see how firms maybe look at, what actually firms are doing, how they change, for instance, their internationalization strategy in light of the difficulties that they face, something like that.
Yeah, okay. That sounds actually very good. And just one quick comment. What I was thinking is probably like not frame it as an industry, but as a geopolitical event. So, for example, what I was thinking, but it's not that I have decided myself yet, but it's, for example, that how should companies plan for when the dollar is not more the dominant currency in the market or something like that, but like instead of framing it in an industry but in an event, and how can companies prevent or research or prepare for such an event when it takes place, something like that. But yeah, thank you for the
Okay, I mean,
insights.
that is another way to say, I mean, there are typical different types of crises. And let's say, I mean, the fact that, or let's say that the lead currency is losing its impact, the dollar, I mean, that's another event. I mean, the Corona pandemic is a specific event. The global financial crisis is an event. I mean, the decay of the NATO. I mean, there are many different things you can, let's say, start with. So that could also be a point. But still, probably you need to go a little bit bigger. I mean, probably you cannot take all effects that maybe the fact, not all look at all effects that might be spurred by the dollar losing its lead currency role. But maybe
Yeah,
still
that's
you want
true.
to integrate, and that's what you should do, and you should work on in the research proposal to get an idea. What actually can I do? I mean, how much can I do? I mean, it's only 3 months, more or less, time where you actually write. So, and I mean, giving the whole thing a dimension, I think that's one of the most important issues of a research proposal, that you actually, when you have crafted the research proposal, that you are clear what you can do and what you can't do, so that you at least have some idea, and that you can discuss that with your supervisor, what is feasible in terms of, let's say, empirical research to do, or let's say the dimension of the problem that you look at, whether you have to fine slice it, whether you have to really narrow it down a little bit more in order to come to some meaningful and thorough results.
Yeah, very clear. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Jonathan. Yeah. How is your journey
Professor,
going?
thank you. Just going back of what you were saying about the time, 3 months for writing. I mean, I think this is my concern in here. So what will be the quality of what we need to research in 3 months, right? So this is something that concerns me, because if we are, thinking about going into I mean, for me, the question is, or the balance will be time versus the level of depth that
Yes.
how much detail we need to put into the research, and what doesn't really mean to research, right?
Yeah.
For 3 months in in a part-time MBA, I think this is quite challenging, and this is where I just want to have your input in how to balance the actual topic and the level of detail that we need to put into it.
Jonathan, thank you very much for this question. I think that's a very important one, because I mean, you also want to do something meaningful. I mean, that's the point is, I mean, probably you do not want to do, let's say, only very nitty-gritty, very tiny questions. But in the end, I mean, I would say a successful MBA thesis is a thesis where you can clearly link up, let's say, to a more general topic, let's say a topic that has a certain relevance, like the combination. Just go back to what Anshul has said, sustainability and AI. So, I mean, that's a huge topic because there are so many things possible over there. You cannot do, let's say, research on this, say, okay, I would like to uncover what can sustainability do, or what can AI do in order to do sustainability. Because we have all kind of industries, we have all kind of countries, we have all kind of different sustainability levels and so on. But what you can do is when you say, okay, my overall topic is maybe sustainability and AI, then you can probably say, from there where you then say, okay, this is definitely a relevant question. Can it really help, for a more sustainable production, or for a more sustainable economic activity? But what you then would need to do, would need to go deeper. That you maybe look into certain, let's say, improvements, let's say in the value chain, how you can maybe track sustainability in the value chain. So that could be a question when we, for instance, take the apparel industry, where you have maybe a value chain that have 10 or 15 different firms into it, of different level, of different countries. So where you then focus on a smaller question, on a smaller question that has a link to these bigger questions, but that smaller question that you then could make research on. When you then say, okay, something like, I take maybe 10 firms or 20 firms or whatever, and I really try to map how does their value chain look like, what kind of instruments do they have in place to track sustainability, or let's say environmental sustainability. So maybe focus on environmental sustainability, maybe not on also environmental and social sustainability, and so on. So this is the narrowing down of a big question to something that is, let's say, only you allow you to make maybe a tiny, a little step ahead, or only a tiny argument. But this argument you probably could, let's say, study in a thorough way by saying, it's not that I did this on the basis of only maybe one firm, but I reconstructed it for 10 firms in a particular segment of the apparel industry. So therefore, I have some, let's say, thorough empirical, let's say, answer, or we can also say a rigorous empirical answer to a tiny problem, or to a small question that is part of a bigger question. And in your thesis, you typically start relatively broad, in that you say, okay, this is the overall problem I look at, and but then you narrow it down to your specific, very tiny, detailed research question, something that is not in the literature discussed yet. And then you engage into your research, and then when you have your results, you then can become broader again, because first of all, you can then indicate the what are your findings, and your thorough findings and your rigorous findings on this narrow question. But then you can also discuss the implications that this have for the broader question. So it's a little bit like a sandwich. Structure. Okay, does that anyhow answer this question, or?
Well, yeah, thank you. It helps. It helps to make an image of how much effort do I need to put into the task, and especially with the time. I mean, it's not about the effort, but the time restriction that I'm worried about.
I mean, a lot is really like not going too broad. And I mean, it's also that, and that's also what you should work out during especially during the research proposal, that you check out things. First of all, one very important part of the research proposal you will work with Mr. Gebhardt is, what is the general problem? Yes, I mean, everybody probably, as we have now had two examples like the VUCA world, or let's say the world in disarray, or many disruptions in the world economy or in the global business context, and implications on the business side. Or we had sustainability and AI. Well, I mean, these are the very broad questions we know anyway. But then, I mean, part of it will actually be during your work on the research proposal to really check, bringing it down to something that is researchable. I mean, not forgetting the links, maybe building also a narrative why this, let's say, more narrow topic is also relevant, is relevant, or where it gets its relevance from. And then, also thinking about what could be done in terms of research. What kind of research approach do you take? Which one is more suitable? But also, I mean, where can I get data? So in other cases, and that's something I always, in particular, say to MBA students, I mean, you might have like the one like Siddharth. I mean, you may have access to data from your work you might be able to use. But then, I mean, the journey is a bit different. You might start from the scratch, maybe with the data where you have access, and then you have to think about, okay, where can I find an appropriate question? Or what kind of questions can I answer with the data that I have? And sometimes, I mean, MBA students have a lot of data or an easy access to maybe experts they could make interviews with. So you can also go bottom up and think about, okay, what is probably, let's say, the problem to the knowledge that I have. And I have seen a very successful MBA thesis, both top down, where people were really thinking from a certain concept and from academic literature and narrowing down that, and then searching for literature, searching for empirical research to be done. But I've also seen it bottom up, where people had certain information or access to data, access to information, and from that we're thinking, how can I, or let's say we're addressing company problems, and from there we're looking at, well, how can I frame that as an academic research? Both is always possible. I mean, I've seen, and both have advantages and disadvantages. I mean, when you have access to data, that's excellent, because I mean, for many students, field access and access to data is a severe problem. Very difficult in general, but also difficult to, let's say, do it in 3 or 4 months when you have, I mean, little time, and where it really needs to gather the data during a certain period of time. So, I mean, that can be very helpful, but the more tricky question is then how to frame it as an academic question. The other way around is probably, I mean, you can do your desk research and you can, let's say, get relatively just from the data from academic literature to a research question. But then the question is, where can I get data and how can I get data? It's also something that you have to consider. I mean, you write your thesis in Germany in the time when, let's say, we have the holiday season. That sometimes have also turned out as a problem. So if you rely very much on let's say, external experts, interviews, survey that you are carrying out, and not so much on secondary data, you at least have to either start relatively early on making contacts and trying to gather this data, or you need to be aware that you maybe have a large pool of people you could send your survey to, or you could make interviews with. If it's only restricted to a few people that can give you some insights, then this might be a problematic issue. But it's these kind of questions you should also think, and you should discuss that, first of all, with Professor Gebhardt, who is running the research methods course in detail on your problem, on your project, but also then later on with your super thesis supervisor. Yeah, Anshul, you had a question, or you would like to ask or comment something? Yeah.
Yeah. With respect to data, we had a question in another class that how to identify the best sources of data, like the quality of sources of data.
Okay, that is a question that very much depends on let's say obviously of what the question is. So. But evaluating, I mean, one thing what you have to do is you have to evaluate the sources. So for instance, in my field, one good criteria of evaluating a particular data source is to take a look at what are others doing that make similar studies. Is there maybe a certain standard data that almost everybody is using? So let's say if people look into the economic development of countries, many people just use the per capita GDP data from the World Bank. So something like that, or when we look into foreign direct investment of firms, many people use the UNCTAD statistics. So there are some data. I mean, that does not mean that there are many more statistical data on foreign direct investment by national countries. For Germany, we have 3 different statistics on foreign direct investment. So from 3 different institutions. But I mean, that's one thing is that you take a look at, okay, what is a common source of data to be used by others? So is there any standard? This is, of course, not the case for some other questions where, let's say, I mean, you gather the data by yourself. There is no statistical data, but you have to gather the data by yourself. Then you probably have to ask yourself different questions. You have to ask yourself, for instance, whom to ask? In what way am I asking? Is it better to gather data in the term of a survey, let's say sending out a questionnaire to somebody or to many people, or is it better to have expert interviews? You get different types of data too. These questions, let's say, what kind of data is appropriate for my research question? That is also something that you work out in when you work on your research proposal. When you, for instance, define, okay, I mean, in the research proposal, what you will work with Professor Gebhardt is, on the one hand, you will define more precisely what is your research question. So for that, he will engage you in trying to find an appropriate research question. And this involves doing an academic literature review. He will tell you about this. That will be the first parts, what he will discuss with you. And then when you have this more narrow research question, then you think about, okay, how can I find data to answer this research question? And what kind of research question, depending on whether it's an open or a closed one, in what kind of field, that defines, let's say, the basic research approach that you take, and that also, let's say, defines the data gathering. He will also help you with some, let's say, information about what can be done. I mean, there is a basic distinction between using either primary data, that is data that is generated by yourself, or using secondary data. That can be a lot of things. I mean, that can be statistical data, that can be, let's say, case studies that exist that you analyze, that can be press clippings, expert voices, interviews, whatever. So that are published. So there can be the data that is secondary data that already exists, but not for your case, but you use it, or you do primary data. And in primary data, typically students do either expert interviews. So you look for a suitable group of people from where you argue, okay, when I'm interested in this and this question, maybe I should talk to these and these people. So let's say when you do this thing about AI and sustainability, one would probably assume that you, in the apparel industry, let's take this example. One would probably think about, okay, I talk to, first of all, maybe some AI specialists that are maybe offering specific services for sustainability solutions. Make interviews with these people, but also make interviews maybe with people in the apparel industry. Maybe make interviews with people that are consultants to, let's say, the apparel industry, or that are IT consultants, because they have a larger overview. Maybe it's relevant that you also make interviews with people that are more agenda setters, like, business associations, or let's say governmental, when you take it at the country level, let's say governmental actors that are relevant for screening the sustainability matters, things like that, where you then think about, okay, who makes sense? And that all, I mean, you can think ahead in your research proposal. And that's one big element of the research proposal is, before you engage in all of that you think about the alternatives, that you check, okay, I mean, there is nothing as bad as when you have developed a nice research question and you discover there is no way to get any data. So, I mean, you develop the research question and then you check what kind of data is feasible, what is available, what is at hand, what can I probably also build myself, what can I gather myself. So, and then maybe you have several alternatives. Sometimes it might be that you combine also secondary and primary data. So in order to, let's say, cover different things. So, but all these thoughts should be made in the research proposal, or during the time when you write the research proposal, so that you have let's say, an idea by the end of the research proposal, when you hand that in to Professor Gebhardt, that you have the feeling, okay, I have now a plan. And I'm not only having a plan, but I have a plan from which I at least have checked the basics, like the basics or whether this plan is doable. And some of the basics, let me call that, is one basic is the research question suitably narrowed down? So anyhow, is it still too big, or is it appropriate in a term of what can be done anyway? Second, is it a gap in the existing research? Thus, I mean, the question that I have promises to get some answers that, let's say, make a little step ahead in the knowledge that we have. So please do not repeat what others have done. When you go narrow, it's also very easy to differentiate to what has been existed. Like, I mean, when you maybe have studies on sustainability and IT, and you have studies, let's say, from the early 2000s, so compared to the current situation, then you can always say, if I look at AI and if I look at specific AI tools, maybe that's something new compared to what we had previously. So can I make any contribution? Or things have been studied for this industry, but not for that industry, or things have been studied for this country or not for that country, or things have been studied for, let's say, the automotive industry in Germany, but not for the automotive industry in India. So this is fine when you somehow differentiate a bit from what has been done, and you are able to then develop some thorough information here, some thorough empirical insights that you can plausibly answer your research question. That is the second thing that you really need to check. And here really is the point: is there any information available, or can I really produce it at reasonable costs of time and money? I mean, you have no money. I mean, this is a little bit like a structural disadvantage you have compared to normal researchers. When I do a research project, I always ask for, when I ask for funding, when I write a competitive research proposal for getting some funding, then I ask for a lot of money. A lot of money is just for gathering data, for making trips to make interviews with people, running large-scale surveys and so on. You can't do that. I mean, it's not that you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money. So you must be somehow realistic what can be done. But the relationship should be kept. The question should be narrow, and the narrower the question, the better you can make appropriate and thorough empirical. You can gain appropriate and thorough empirical insights. The broader the question, the more difficult it is, because, I mean, it will always be very scattered, some information. So therefore, I mean, these things are put together. And then also something that you are asked is that in the research proposal that you make also like a work plan. I mean, most of you do know that anyway from your work. If you have a project, so you make a work plan where you plan, in particular, the time resources that you have. So, and that will also be looked up by Professor Gebhardt, and should also be discussed with your supervisor. Okay, any other questions? I mean, I already mentioned a few things.
More than a question, a concern, that I was going through the outline of the research proposal on Moodle. It has around 10 headings, and some of these are overlapping headings also, like what I understand right now. And we only have 2,000 words to write in.
Exactly.
So how do we put that? Like, do we use everything as a header, and how do we put that into 2,000 words then?
Yeah. I mean, what you should write up should be the concluding or the conclusion of what you have thought about. So a very precise, let's say, result of your reasoning. Let's say, of course, I mean, the 2,000 words is, I mean, nobody cares if it is a little bit longer, but it's not a long document, because the problem often is you can write thousands and thousands words about something, but not take a decision. So, I mean, but you can maybe, let's say, make three sentences from which you, let's say, define what is the overall subject of your thesis and how do you narrow that down and what is the research question. So, I mean, it should only be the result of your, should only keep the result of your exploration. So, for instance, when you have the point data use, so that should be the result when you had to look where you finally make a conclusion upon. Okay, I looked up this, I looked up that. I mean, there is this possibility, there is that possibility, and there is that maybe a third possibility. of gathering data. What you write over there is, I used maybe the third possibility of data gathering because that you motivate, and that does not need a long words. It is the result, and it should represent the result of your reasoning about it, and kind of a decision. Sometimes if you're very unclear what is the better thing, you can also put two options over there, and you can use that and discuss that with Professor Gebhardt, and also probably later with your supervisor to get some feedback from that side. But what the research proposal should be and should demonstrate is that you have a feasibility plan that can be shared. First with Professor Gebhardt, who gives you some advice to how to maybe that gives you some feedback according to which you can maybe modify it a little bit, and then your let's say the thesis supervisor, in particular the first supervisor who is supervising you, with whom the thesis also is a kind of a contract. I mean, the typical thing is when you have developed your research proposal, and maybe when you have incorporated the contact, let's say the feedback from Professor Gebhardt in the research methods course, the latest by then you send this to maybe a person or a professor you want to supervise your thesis. And then there is a discussion with this professor who should be knowledgeable in the field, in this field where you are actually doing your research, who is also able to evaluate your proposal on the case of novelty and on the case of feasibility. And well, when you discuss that with the person, that in the end there is a kind of a, I mean, there's not a formal contract, but I mean there is a kind of an informal understanding. Okay, I have really thoroughly thought about the whole project of my thesis. I've discussed that with my supervisor. He or she agreed with it, or maybe made some modification and had some little concerns. I was then maybe modifying it again a bit, but then I have, let's say, a work plan that at least should not run into big problems. So that's my my personal experience from having, let's say, supervised many theses, also many MBA theses, is when the research proposal is thorough, when you really devoted some time to maybe not do procrastination and say, okay, about the data, I think later. No, you think in the research proposal about what data is feasible and check it, because it's better than to say, no, there is no data, or maybe often it is not this like that there is no data or there is no possibility, but maybe you have to rephrase a little bit your research question in order to fit it. Because the whole thing of your thesis in the end is like the Rubik cube where you have to put the things together. So, I mean, at this stage, a lot of modification is possible. And also, I mean, you can draw, and that's also the duty of your thesis supervisor, is at least the duty is exactly here, that they say, okay, what you have proposed, that makes sense to me. Or they should speak up and say, no, I don't think that this works. And they should then probably guide you into some direction. But the idea is that you develop the ideas to a stage where you can say, okay, professor, this is my idea that I have. And I've really thought it out. It's like a real proposal. And I would like to have your final feedback before I can start with it. Okay. Any more questions or comments or concerns? So, I mean, in some cases, I'm sure it might also be that when you say, okay, there are 4 different sources, and when you make a little let's say, evaluation of what is possible and what is not possible, or an evaluation of different sources. Yeah, that is all fine. Nobody is bothering when you, let's say, need a little bit more space in the research proposal. But that should not be the point that you postpone decisions. You should dare decisions, and you should say, okay, this is what I'm on the basis of what I've really and I've thoroughly tried to get it to get enough information. This is my, at the moment, decision. At the moment, I would like to do it like this, and this is what you offer your thesis supervisor, and say, okay, this is how far I am. I check this, I check that, I check that. But I mean, my current idea is to do it like this, and then he or she should comment and say yes. Sometimes they have ideas that can be very helpful on that, or they say yes, go along that way. Yeah, Constant.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, hi.
When does the research proposal due?
Let me say, it's due on the 27th of April.
Okay, 27th April, thank you.
Yeah, let me give you a little bit, maybe the timeline of the research methods course. I mean, we are here only a pre-course to, let's say, get you a little bit mooded, let's say, in how to develop the research proposal, how to do the research proposal. Actually, you will write it in the research methods course, and the research methods course starts on the 26th, so that's probably, yeah, that's next week. And you have 2 online meetings first. And the first online meeting typically is on how to craft an appropriate research question, what we have discussed, coming from a big topic to, let's say, a small doable topic. And it also, in the second meeting, you will discuss about doing a literature review, because an academic review of the academic literature, because that is often the point how you get it narrowed down, and also how you can show that you come up with something that has not been dealt with in the academic literature so far. What is a requirement? And then you have 12 hours of presence meeting with Professor Gebhardt. Towards the end, let's say in I think in the 19th and 20th of March, where you really there's time to talk to him also individually about your specific proposal. And also in the first online meetings, it's always very helpful if you come up with probably he will also ask you, okay, can you tell me a little bit about your ideas? So he will make some input, more than input into, let's say, how to really craft an appropriate research question and so on. He will make some presentations, but there will always, in all the meetings, and will also be the possibility that you are able to start talking about your thesis. About your thesis ideas, about your thesis topics, and use him as a resource person to get it, let's say, further developed, or to ask for specific tips. So he has a lot of experience in doing also empirical research in business and management, various topics. So he can be quite helpful with that. But this is where he is your sounding board to develop your thesis proposal. If you mentioned that already, I mean, in my last meeting, you can also talk to somebody, let's say, when you already have contact made with a potential supervisor, you can also maybe discuss your thesis topic with your supervisor. Let's say, in particular, with your first supervisor from the Berlin School of Economics. That is fine. And if you, I mean, in the past, and what Siddharth probably mentioned, in the past, people have already developed research proposals before the course has started, because, I mean, they, for whatever reasons, want to get it done earlier or have made these contacts before. So that is also fine. I mean, you could also then, let's say, present your research proposal maybe to Professor Gebhardt at an earlier stage when you have the feeling that you are ready with it. So there is no need to do something extra. In a case, of course, I mean, you should address the points that the research proposal, let's say, is stipulating. But I mean, anyway, these are relevant points to be addressed by any supervisor asks you or should ask you about that. So it looks sometimes a little bit different. Supervisors sometimes have a focus on this or on that, but on average, I've never learned that. I mean, there is a big that supervisors have completely different opinions about what should be part of a research proposal or of a thesis proposal. So be prepared, and maybe for you also, maybe I cannot give you any homework, but maybe think a little bit in the next week or so when you have some time. I mean, what is maybe the subject matter in very general terms, and what are maybe your first ideas? Nobody expects you to come up with something set in stone in the very beginning. It's a process that you are going through. And not before you have to hand in the research proposal by the end of April, which is by now February, March, April, so still 3 months time. So you have time to develop your research proposal and to make up your ideas. There's nobody forcing you to come up with it directly now. But use the time that you have, because a research proposal should be the result of some longer dealing with a certain subject matter and the different parts of, let's say, a topic, what you find boiled down in these, I think it's 10 or 12 different points of the research proposal. And you need time for it, because, I mean, you also have to maybe look a little bit into research methods literature in order to get that. All right. So does that answer your research question? Sorry, does that answer your question?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, Maria.
I had one more question. So on the 26th of January, I see in the calendar that we have some kind of online exam for research methods. Is it still happening, or it was like the previous information that I just put in my calendar?
I mean, I have from Andrea the information that the course starts on the 26th of January, and there are 4 hours online meeting, but not an exam.
Oh, okay. So I just put it as exam. Okay, got it. Then
Yeah.
on the 26th,
and the second date is on the 9th of February.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then 20th March, yeah, that's in presence. And then the deadline is the 27th of April.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, we have mentioned a lot of things about the research proposal already. I don't know. Did anybody of you took a look in the article, or shall I present what this article is basically about? I mean, it matches very much my understanding of what a research proposal is. Okay. Yeah, I hope you can see my my presentation.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Martin, you also said, I have it too. It says it is in room C94 next Monday. Please check that then with Andrea.
For sure, we will. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's something different, but as far as I do know, it is should be online. But maybe is there anything else? I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. You're welcome. Yeah. So in this article, okay, I must say I'm a big fan of let's say a research proposal. I remember my own thesis writing without a proposal, where I only had to hand in a topic to my supervisor at that time, and that also was the only time when I saw the supervisor. And but that's a long time ago. I mean, that's almost 40 years ago. And, I was running into very, very deep trouble while writing my thesis. And also, I mean, as a supervisor, I really learned that when you have a well-crafted research proposal, then you have a head start, and also it's not only a head start, but working on a thorough. When you have a thorough proposal, when you really devote efforts in crafting that, and that really is the result of some thorough reasoning about it, then you can also feel relatively safe while writing your thesis. When you don't do that, and when you do not really thoroughly deal with the problems while the research proposal phase, then you might run into bigger issues later on. So the research proposal, I mean, it should provide a clear roadmap for your research. I mean, when you have done it, I mean, maybe only operational issues should remain, but you should actually know what you are writing about in detail, what kind of a research approach are you using, and let's say, what kind of data or where do you get data from. So these three things should be clear. As I also mentioned, I mean, the research proposal it is actually a project offer from your side to your supervisor, and I call it a contract, and also, I mean, the article by Denscom is calling it a contract, because I mean, you take the supervisor on board when you say, okay, this is my proposal. Please discuss my proposal with me. And if he agrees, to your proposal, he is also, to some extent, responsible for it. Maybe not for all the execution, but for that the baseline is okay. So otherwise, she or he has to speak up. Developing the research proposal helps identify and address potential weaknesses early. Yes, this is also something where when you work on the research proposal, then you realize, okay, here, I mean, there is maybe a weakness or a limitation I cannot avoid. But maybe it helps you to develop maybe some fallback positions and things like that for some of the weaknesses. At this stage, when you do the proposal, a lot of things is possible. I mean, you can simply redirect certain things or change certain things. What I, however, think is the most important, let's say, feature of a research proposal is that when you do that, when you work on your topic, you learn about the topical content, so that it's a learning exercise that you engage. On the one hand, when you define your narrow research question, you learn about what is known about a particular topic in a field. You learn to better understand the background of your topic. So you try to elaborate what is really like a gap in this field that you might address, and you learn about research methodology. So in the course of writing the research proposal, you also need to take decisions. You need to familiarize you with the question, is it better to make a quantitative analysis, or is it better to make a qualitative analysis? What does research methods literature tell me? In what cases shall I do the one, or in what cases shall I do the other? What possibilities do exist in order to, let's say, analyze data? What kind of statistical means, if, for instance, I made a survey, are doable? What kind of, let's say, analyze techniques do I have to look at, or may I use when I make interviews, or qualitative content analysis, for instance? So all the technicalities, first of all, with regard to the message, which methods to choose, but also how to do it. I mean, that is what you need to explore if you do not have much experience with that before. And many of you probably, it's a long time ago that you have written your thesis, or some of you probably never have written a thesis, an academic paper. For them, it's novel. You have to learn about the research methods. And in the research methods course, Professor Gebhardt will also provide you some material, let's say, research methods books, online books where you can look up certain things, or specialized articles on particular research methods, like when you do a comparative case study, for instance. There are a few articles that, for instance, tell you quite a bit about how to craft that from a very, I would say, more technical sense, how to do it. So, and this is, I mean, this costs time and effort to really get into that. But I mean, when you learn it, I mean, it's not like that you have to learn it to perfection, things like that. But I mean, you have to learn and you have to read into research methods literature in order to understand, for instance, what is the potential of a particular method? What do I need in order to apply it? What kind of skills do I need to have? And let's say, how do I do it practically? Let's say really practically. I mean, how do I do some coding of an interview that I've made when you have not done it? But this is like where you, I mean, you don't do it. Of course, you don't do it in the research proposal, but you need to get an understanding of what it is, what maybe a method entails, and whether you master the appropriate skills, and so that you have some idea. Okay, I know that I can do that. I know there is a way. I know there is also, let's say, the research method as a cookbook, in a sense, that give you a recipe how to, let's say, craft certain steps of your thesis. This is also a learning exercise, that you get an overview and that you can make a well-founded decision, and that you know where to look when you actually do it then in your research. Where do I look particularly, in what kind of research methods literature? Let's say when I'm doing a qualitative content analysis, there are a few maybe methods books. When I look at this book, I really get answer to all of my more procedural questions, how to make this analysis. I mean, that's what, when you have the feeling to say, okay, when I, for instance, do a qualitative content analysis of interview data, I can use MyRing as a certain source that give me all the tools in hand in order to actually craft it at a professional level. So that's what, let's say, the research proposal should give you. Okay. Yeah, what is the problematic, or what are the problematic parts? What do you think are the most problematic parts, let's say, when you develop the research proposal? Have you any fear or any idea what will be the most difficult part for you? most
maybe
time-consuming.
collect interviews or collect some data that you can't get from written sources.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not talking about the research process itself, but I'm talking about the research proposal. When I got it right, you spoke more about the actual research process in the end. Correct?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. The research proposal, what do you think? I mean,
then to narrow down your topic somehow, maybe you have some big idea.
Yeah.
And you need to make something very specific out of it.
Yeah. I mean, that often I would say, yeah, you're right. I mean, but it's maybe not such a problem of resources that you have, but it's a little bit the problem of I mean, making decisions, making appropriate decisions. You know, the point often is you have a very broad question, and from there you can go in every direction. What I have often seen as a problem is that, I mean, students often have a problem because they think there is one best way to go. But this is not true. I mean, there are many different ways how you can go, which are probably equally valid. There are some ways you cannot go because they don't work. I mean, that exists too, but there are many different ways how you can narrow it down. I mean, studying the internationalizations or the changed internationalization strategies due to geopolitical turmoil of Chinese MNEs is as good as studying the ones from Jamaica. I mean, with the exception that there are not so many MNEs from multinational corporations from Jamaica, but let's say from India or from Germany. So, or making it a focus on the automotive industry. So, I mean, there's nothing. Often these decisions are taken on the basis not that they represent the best. I mean, a choice that you can ever do, but that they represent something that is satisfying, something that is doable. That is what you have to do. And you know, often the problem is about the decision making. I mean, in that respect. But I mean, another thing where I think you have also right is what consumes quite some time is when you have a somewhat narrow question, let's say, or when you have narrowed down the question, then searching for the existing academic literature and analyzing this literature in a literature review, what you have to do later in the paper, but what you have to do cursorily also already, let's say, for the research proposal, so that you have a clue, or that you have could just say a motivated guess that something is a research gap. So that is what you need to do. Let's say, ensuring the relevance and the comprehensive coverage of the literature you look in order to, let's say, construct a good research question and maybe a narrative that leads to the research question. That is also something that is, I would say, challenging. Methodology, choosing appropriate research design and tools. I think also that is also, I mean, a challenging thing, because you have to explore. I mean, if you do not have much experience, I mean, with particular research approaches. Let me say one thing, probably that makes it sometimes easier. I mean, the question often is, what are your experiences? So, I mean, if you have not had any, let's say, statistical knowledge, if you have not engaged in quantitative research, making large-scale surveys, developing running regressions, and so on. So if this whole instrument of statistical analysis is very much unknown to you, because you have not met it, then I would say do not look for a question where you, let's say for a research question where you exactly need to do that, because that is often very difficult and not so easy really to learn. I mean, at the basic level, coming up with descriptive statistics where you only develop percentual values, that percent values, I mean, that is easy. But also that is often not satisfying for a quantitative research. If you fail to have this somehow background, it's probably better to go for a kind of qualitative approach to do, because I mean, it's not so, I would say it's not so difficult to learn qualitative techniques, data gathering techniques and data analysis techniques as it is with regard to quantitative. It all depends on your, also, I mean, some of you probably, even so if they don't have had that before, but I mean, if you are very strong in mathematics and logical thinking and so on, then you can do it. But even so, if you do not have that experience, but mostly if you are strong in that, you already had some background into that. So, and that could also be, let's say, something that frames your decisions to say, what are my skills in terms of doing research? So, and one can answer similar or relatively similar questions either through qualitative research or to quantitative research. Sometimes it's only maybe some specific, I would say aspect and way how you frame the research question that either devotes for one or the other basic direction that you go. Okay, the other things we have already mentioned, data possibilities and limitations, what data can be gathered, when and how. Ethical considerations, typically, I think, I mean, they do not play such a big role in, or they can play a big role in business and management, but I mean, they are much more relevant when you, for instance, do some scientific research in medical sciences or in other more risk-relevant areas. But also ethical considerations may come at play because, I mean, you need to be sometimes have to obey confidentiality issues when you make interviews. You have to ask for consent. If you, let's say, publish something in a non-anonymized way. And I mean, the credibility is also an issue. Also with regard to what people tell you and what people don't tell you in interviews. But I mean, it's not such a big deal here in this type of research. Okay, let me see. Last point I would like to mention, how might the research proposal help you to refine your research question and identify practical limitations in your project? I think, any work on the research proposal give you clarity, help you defining the real precise research aim and objectives. It's all about feasibility. Also, I mean, making your life easier in those, I mean, anyway, your life is very difficult as you do it part-time. And I mean, you must really be careful what you actually wish to do. So in order not to overstress you. And I mean, you have to anticipate limitations and challenges. And yeah, I mean, limitations are also allowed. I mean, you cannot with your thesis really answer all questions, or some important parts cannot be addressed, which is fine when you indicate that, and when you say, and that's also in the thesis, there's always a section where you can indicate your limitations. Both limitations topic-wise, so but also with regard to the data gathering. So you have always a good chance to also argue, and to argue why your thesis, let's say, probably is not this overall, does not have this overall scope you would like to wish that it has, but it doesn't have. Also for rather practical matters of time constraints and certain excess. Okay, my warm, overall, summing it up, I mean, my warm recommendation to you is, I mean, use the time to develop the research proposal. Be thorough about it. It takes some time. I mean, you can easily fill these 2,000 words in 2 days or in one afternoon. But I mean, if this is not, let's say, the result of some real reasoning about it and real exploration about it, then you have the problems later. If you do that thoroughly, I can promise you that you also have a smooth research process. Actually, the 4 months will be much easier than if you don't do it thoroughly. Okay, I hope I have convinced you to devote some time in it. Do you have some questions left or some comments for me? Okay, if that is not the case, yeah, I can only offer you, I'll be there for questions that you might have. Also, when you work together with Professor Geppert, we both work together in other projects too. I mean, we write a lot together. I mean, if you have any questions or if you feel more, let's say, comfortable to talk to me about it, it's also fine. Yeah, and then I wish you good luck in this journey. I hope you all perform very well as your fellow students that we have just had the graduation ceremony by the end of November, and I'm looking forward, if I don't see and hear from you in between, then to see you then in November and to see your bachelor, your master hats flying. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Professor. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, you too.
Have a
Bye.
nice evening, you too.
Bye-bye.